My name is Zoe, and I'm 28 years old. For the last decade, my family, and most especially my older sister Clara, has treated me like a charming but ultimately tragic failure. To them, I was the girl with her head in the clouds, wasting a sharp mind on a hobby, a degree in architectural history that they were certain would lead to a lifetime of debt and serving coffee. They never missed a chance to remind me. So when my doctoral graduation day arrived, the culmination of years of silent grinding work, it wasn't a surprise when none of them showed up. Clara had a vital charity gala, and my parents had a golf tournament. They thought it was just a little ceremony for a useless piece of paper. They had no idea who was sitting in the front row waiting for me, or that the next morning the city's most important newspaper would have my face on the front page. They were about to learn that while they were looking down on me, I was busy changing the city's skyline. And now please stop the video and subscribe to our channel. To be able to keep making videos like this, we need to reach 1,000 subscribers as soon as possible. Thank you. My sister Clara is 3 years older than me, and in the cosmos of our family, she has always been the sun. I, by extension, was the forgotten, chilly little moon, orbiting her magnificent glow. From the very beginning, our paths were set on divergent courses that to my parents, and certainly to Clara, had a clear hierarchy of value. Clara was practical, sharp, and ambitious in a way they could understand, and more importantly, brag about. She wanted to be a lawyer, a desire that formed in her mind around age 12, and never once wavered. Her childhood was a highlight reel of debate club trophies, mock trial victories, and straight-A report cards that were permanently affixed to the refrigerator with novelty magnets. She spoke of her future in terms of billable hours and corner offices. My parents saw her as their masterpiece, a testament to their good parenting, a walking, talking return on investment. And me, I was the quiet one, the dreamer, the girl who didn't collect trophies but instead collected scraps of history. My obsession wasn't with winning arguments, but with understanding the silent stories told by old buildings. I would spend hours sketching the crumbling cornices of the old post office, or trying to capture the exact curve of a wrought iron fence from the 19th century. To Clara, this was pitiable. "Why are you always drawing that dusty old junk, Zoe?" she'd ask, wrinkling her nose as she breezed past my desk on her way to a student government meeting. "There are brand new, shiny buildings downtown. Go draw those. At least they're worth something." My parents' response was a gentler, but no less dismissive, form of the same sentiment. "It's a lovely hobby, dear," my mother would say, patting my head. "You're so artistic." The word artistic was always delivered with a faint, almost imperceptible sigh, as if it were a charming but terminal diagnosis. They enabled Clara's condescension, not out of malice, but out of a shared worldview. In their world, value was tangible, quantifiable, and printed on a pay-stub. The intricate beauty of a forgotten Georgian facade held no currency. It was this fundamental disconnect that defined my entire upbringing. A quiet, persistent hum of being misunderstood and undervalued. A foundation of frustration upon which the rest of my life would be built. The day I announced my intended major at university was the day the quiet hum of disapproval became a blaring alarm. We were at one of our painfully formal Sunday dinners, a tradition my mother insisted upon. Clara, home for the weekend from her pre-law program, was holding court, regaling us with a story about a particularly grueling but prestigious internship she had landed at a top-tier law firm. My father was beaming, hanging on her every word. "That's my girl," he said, raising his wine glass. "Climbing the ladder already." Then at all, my mother turned her gaze to me, her smile tightening slightly. "And what about you, Zoe? Have you given any more thought to your major? Maybe something in business? A good, practical foundation." I took a deep breath, clutching my fork so tightly my knuckles were white. "I've decided," I said, my voice sounding small in the sudden silence. "I'm going to major in architectural history." Clara, who had just taken a delicate sip of water, actually choked. A spray of water misted the tablecloth before she broke into a full, unrestrained laugh. It wasn't a kind laugh. It was a bark of genuine, incredulous amusement. "Architectural what?" she sputtered, wiping her mouth with a napkin. "History? Zoe, what on earth are you going to do with that? Give tours to bored tourists? You'll be lucky to get a job at a coffee shop." My father's proud expression had melted into one of deep concern. "Honey, Clara has a point. It sounds niche. Are you sure that's a wise investment of your tuition?" My mother just looked pained. "You could minor in it, maybe? As a passion project?" The message was clear. My passion was a liability. Clara's ambition was an asset. I tried to explain, to talk about preservation, about consulting, about the academic path, but my words were just noise to them. They were lost in the dazzling glare of Clara's future as a high-powered attorney. "I'm going to make partner by the time I'm 35, Clara announced, steering the conversation back to her favourite topic, herself. "I just hope you'll be able to afford a ticket to the celebration dinner, Zoe." That night, I cried myself to sleep. Not because she was mean, but because she so perfectly articulated what my entire family believed. My path was a joke, a dead end, a footnote in the grand story of the family's success, which would be written entirely by her. It was a wound that never quite healed, and it festered for years. My university years and the postgraduate period that followed were a long, lonely marathon of proving myself to an audience that refused to watch. Every holiday, every family gathering, was a fresh performance of the same tired play. Clara would arrive, dressed in a sharp, expensive suit, her stories peppered with names of senior partners and judges. She'd talk about mergers and acquisitions, about brutal litigation schedules, and the sheer, intoxicating thrill of winning a difficult case. My parents and extended family would listen, enthralled. Then, all eyes would turn to me, the quirky art historian in the corner. "So, Zoe," my Aunt Carol, the family's chief enabler, would ask, her voice dripping with pity. "Still looking at old bricks?" The question was always followed by a ripple of polite, uncomfortable laughter. I would try to share my own victories, my own passions. I'd talk about the thrill of discovering an original blueprint in a dusty archive, or the complex social history revealed by the changing floor plan of a single tenement building over 2 centuries. I once spent 20 minutes excitedly explaining how I'd used spectrographic analysis to identify the original 18th century paint pigments on a historic mantelpiece. When I finished, my father just blinked slowly and said, "That's nice, dear. Pass the potatoes." My successes were invisible to them because they didn't fit their definition of the word. When I received a prestigious fellowship for my master's degree, Clara's only comment was, "So they're paying you to stay in school longer? Cute." When I announced my decision to pursue a doctorate, they staged what amounted to a family intervention. "Zoe, you're 25 years old," my father said, his voice grave. "This is getting ridiculous. You can't hide in a library forever. You need to enter the real world." It was Clara who delivered the killing blow, a masterstroke of condescending generosity. "Look, Zoe, I get it," she said, putting a manicured hand on my arm. "You're scared. But I can help. My firm is always looking for entry-level paralegals. It's not glamorous, but it's a real job. I'll even put in a good word for you." The offer hung in the air, a perfect encapsulation of how she saw me. A charity case in need of rescue from my own foolish dreams. I politely declined, and their collective disappointment was a physical weight in the room. They couldn't understand that I wasn't hiding from the world. I was building one of my own, a world they had no interest in seeing, let alone visiting. It was during the second year of my PhD program that my secret life began. The constant dismissal from my family, rather than breaking me, had forged a kind of protective shell around my ambition. Since they didn't believe in my work, I simply stopped talking about it. This created a vacuum of information that I learned to use to my advantage. I had a mentor, a brilliant and fiercely supportive man named Professor Albright, who recognized my potential from my very first seminar. He saw the fire in me that my family mistook for aimless eccentricity. "Zoe," he told me once, over coffee in his book-cluttered office, "your ability to see the narrative in a structure is a rare gift. Don't ever let anyone tell you it's not valuable." It was Professor Albright who, seeing my frustration with purely theoretical work, encouraged me to start a small, independent consulting practice. I created a simple website under a pseudonym, the Aegis Group, a name that felt appropriately protective and historical. My first client was a small historical society in a neighbouring town who paid me a few $100s to help them authenticate the construction date of their headquarters. It felt like a monumental victory. Then, through a referral from that project, I got a slightly larger contract to consult on the restoration of a small, privately owned commercial building in our city's historic district. I was still a full-time student, so I did the work on nights and weekends, fueled by cheap coffee and a burning desire to prove everyone wrong. This was when I met Leo, my partner. He was a software engineer, working for a tech company in the same building I was consulting on. He saw me on site, covered in dust, taking detailed measurements of window casings at 7 in the morning, and was intrigued. He didn't ask what I was going to do with my degree. He just asked, "What's the story of this place?" He listened, truly listened, and he became my silent, unwavering ally. He was the only person, aside from Professor Albright, who knew about my burgeoning career, and that career was about to explode. The owner of the commercial building I restored was so impressed with my work that he recommended me to a friend of his, a man who sat on the board of the Harrison Foundation, a massive philanthropic organisation run by a famously reclusive and eccentric billionaire, Mr. Alistair Harrison. Mr. Harrison had a passion for urban renewal and had been looking for a new, groundbreaking project to fund. They were looking for a visionary, someone with a deep respect for history, but also a modern, practical approach. They didn't want a stuffy, established firm. They wanted fresh eyes. After a series of discreet meetings, shrouded in non-disclosure agreements that would have made Clara's head spin, I was offered the contract of a lifetime. The Harrison Foundation was launching a $100 million initiative to preserve and revitalise the entire historic heart of our city, and they wanted me, a 26-year-old PhD student operating under a pseudonym, to secretly lead the entire thing. While my family was pitying my life as a perpetual student, I was managing budgets, hiring architectural firms, and negotiating with city planners on a project that would reshape the future of our metropolis. I was living a double life, and the disconnect between their perception and my reality had become a vast, cavernous, and deeply ironic secret. The catalyst, the event that would finally force these two parallel universes to collide, was my doctoral graduation. After years of relentless work, juggling a secret high-stakes career with the demands of writing a 500-page dissertation, the end was finally in sight. I had not only completed my research, but had done so with distinction, and the university had decided to honour me with a special award for outstanding contribution to applied humanities, in recognition of my dissertation's real-world impact, an impact they didn't even fully understand as the Harrison project was still under wraps. The date was set. A Saturday in late May. With a sense of trepidation and a flicker of foolish hope that this time, maybe this time, they would see, I sent out the invitations. I called my mother first. "Mum, my graduation is on the 27th of May. I'd love for you and Dad to be there." There was a pause on the line, followed by a faint, "Oh." It was a word heavy with inconvenience. "The 27th? Oh, Zoe, that's the first weekend of the club's summer golf league. Your father and I are in a foursome. It's a very important tournament." An important tournament. more important than watching her daughter receive the highest academic degree possible. "I see," I said, my voice flat. "Well, just thought I'd ask." I knew what Clara's answer would be before I even dialed her number, but I had to go through the motions. She picked up on the second ring, her voice brisk and businesslike. "Clara? Hi. Just calling to invite you to my graduation." I didn't even finish the sentence before she cut me off. "Zoe, I'm so sorry, but that weekend is impossible," she said, the apology in her voice thin as onion skin. "It's the annual benefactors gala for the Children's Hospital. My firm bought a whole table, and it's basically mandatory for all the associates who are on the partner track. It's a massive networking opportunity. I just can't miss it." She said it with such finality, as if there were no possible world in which my little ceremony could compete with her schmoozing. "I understand," I said, a strange sense of calm washing over me. "It sounds very important." And in that moment, I knew. The last flicker of hope died, and in its place, a cold, hard resolve settled in my bones. It wasn't just that they weren't coming. It was that they didn't even feel the need to invent a believable excuse. My accomplishment was so insignificant in their eyes that a golf game and a cocktail party was self-evidently more important. "Don't worry about it," I told her, my tone light, almost cheerful. "Leo will be there. It'll be a small affair." She was relieved. I had let her off the hook. But what she didn't know was that I was no longer holding a hook. I was holding a detonator. And she had just told me exactly when to press the button. The day of the graduation was beautiful. A perfect cloudless sky arching over the university's main quad. As I walked towards the auditorium in my cap and gown, I felt none of the sadness I thought I would. Instead, I felt a profound sense of liberation. My family wasn't there, and their absence was a gift. It meant the day was entirely my own, unburdened by their pitying glances or forced smiles. Leo was waiting for me at the entrance, his face beaming with a pride so genuine it almost brought me to tears. He squeezed my hand. "Dr. Vance, I presume?" he whispered, and I laughed. Professor Albright was there too, looking every bit the proud academic mentor. But there was another guest, one who slipped into the front row reserved for my family, quietly and without fanfare. Mr. Alistair Harrison himself. His presence was the final piece of the puzzle. He had flown in from his private estate just for this, a gesture of respect my own family couldn't be bothered to make. The ceremony was long, as these things are, but I savoured every moment. When my name was called, Dr. Zoe Vance, the sound echoed in the vast hall, a clear, definitive statement of who I had become. When I walked across the stage to receive my diploma, I made eye contact with Leo, with Professor Albright, and with Mr. Harrison, the three people who had formed my true family of support and belief. After the main ceremony, the Dean of Humanities took the stage to present the special awards. He spoke about the importance of bridging the gap between academia and the public good. This year's award for outstanding contribution to applied humanities goes to a student whose work exemplifies this bridge, he announced. Her dissertation on civic revitalization through historical preservation is already having a tangible impact on our city, thanks to a groundbreaking new partnership. It is my honour to recognise the brilliant work of Dr. Zoe Vance. The applause felt different this time, more significant. After the ceremony, in a small private reception, the university's official photographer captured the moment that would soon be seen by the entire city. Me, holding my diploma and my award, shaking hands with a smiling Mr. Harrison, with the university chancellor on my other side. We had coordinated it all with a journalist from the city's leading newspaper, a woman who had been tracking the Harrison Foundation's mysterious new project for months. I gave her an exclusive, in-depth interview, revealing everything. The secret was finally out of my hands, ready to be delivered to the doorsteps of the very people who thought I was still just drawing dusty old junk. The next morning was a Sunday. I imagined my parents were on their back patio, sipping coffee and reading the paper before heading off to their golf club. I imagined Clara was at her gleaming minimalist apartment, perhaps enjoying a late brunch with one of her equally ambitious lawyer friends, recounting the triumphs of her gala. I, on the other hand, was sitting with Leo in our small sun-drenched living room, a stack of newspapers on the coffee table. The headline was bigger and bolder than I had even dared to hope. It was above the fold, on the front page of the Sunday edition, a place usually reserved for major political scandals or corporate mergers. But today, it was my story. The visionary behind the Harrison grant, Dr. Zoe Vance, 28, unveiled as head of City's $100 million preservation project. Below the massive headline was the photograph. Me, looking confident and happy, shaking hands with the notoriously reclusive billionaire Alistair Harrison. The article was a masterpiece of journalism. It detailed my 2 years of undercover work as the head of the Aegis Group. It lauded my innovative approach, which blended meticulous historical research with sustainable urban planning. It quoted Professor Albright, who called me a once-in-a-generation mind in the field. It quoted the mayor, who praised my unwavering commitment to our city's soul. It even quoted Mr. Harrison, a man who hadn't given a public quote in over a decade, who simply said, "Dr. Vance sees not just what our city was, but what it can be. We are honoured to fund her vision." It mentioned my newly minted doctorate almost as an afterthought, a final impressive detail in a much larger story of staggering success. For a few blissful hours, there was silence. Then, precisely at 10:17 a.m., my phone rang. It was my mother. Her voice was thin, reedy, a sound I had never heard from her before. "Zoe, is that you? We saw the paper. Your father he's just staring at it." "What is all this? $100 million? It must be a mistake. Is this some kind of joke?" The sheer, uncomprehending shock in her voice was the first taste of a victory I hadn't even known I craved. Before I could even formulate a proper response to my mother, my phone buzzed with another incoming call. It was Clara. I let my mother's call go to voicemail and answered. "Hello, Clara," I said, my voice perfectly level. There was a moment of charged silence on the other end, just the sound of her sharp, ragged breathing. Then she exploded. "What have you done?" she shrieked, her voice a discordant symphony of fury, humiliation, and utter disbelief. "What in the hell have you done, Zoe?" I could hear the echo of her voice, as if she were pacing in a large, empty room. "My phone has been blowing up all morning. The senior partner at my firm, the one I spent all night trying to impress at that stupid gala, just sent me the link to the article with the message, 'Is this your sister? Congratulations.' Do you have any idea how that makes me look?" I leaned back on the sofa, a slow, calm smile spreading across my face. Leo gave my hand a squeeze. The power dynamic, a fixed and immutable law of our family universe for nearly 3 decades, had just experienced a tectonic shift. "How does it make you look, Clara?" I asked, my tone genuinely curious. "It makes me look like a fool," she yelled. "It makes our whole family look like idiots. We had no idea. Everyone is asking me questions I can't answer. Why didn't you tell us you were doing this? That you knew Alistair Harrison? That you were managing a project of this magnitude?" And there it was, the real heart of her anger. It wasn't about me. It was about her. My success had blindsided her, had robbed her of the chance to manage the narrative, to co-opt my achievement and present it as part of her own successful world. This was the moment I had been waiting for, the moment to finally say what had been left unsaid for so long. My voice, when I spoke, was no longer the quiet, hesitant voice of the family's artistic failure. It was the calm, measured and confident voice of Dr. Zoe Vance, head of the Harrison Preservation Project. "Why would I have told you, Clara?" I began. letting the question hang in the air. So you could have offered me your unsolicited advice on contract law? So you could have explained to your friends that your quirky little sister had stumbled into a bit of luck? So you could have warned me that I was in over my head? I paused, letting the silence stretch. Let's be honest. You've never respected my work, my passion, or my intelligence. You didn't even think my doctorate, the culmination of 7 years of my life, was worth a few hours of your time on a Saturday. You had a party to go to, a massive networking opportunity. I let the irony of her own words sink in. This success, Clara, was built in the silence you and the family created. I earned it in the years you were all looking the other way, pitying me. It was mine to build, and therefore it was mine to reveal. You were never interested in my journey. You were only ever interested in a destination you could brag about. Well, here it is. Welcome to the destination. There was only stunned silence on the other end of the line. For the first time in my life, I had left Clara utterly speechless. The fallout was swift and seismic. The world I had built in secret was now public knowledge, and my family was forced to navigate the rubble of their long-held assumptions. Clara's humiliation was the most profound. Her entire identity was built on being the successful Vance sister. She had curated a persona of effortless superiority, and in the space of a single newspaper article, that persona had been completely dismantled. She had to walk into her shark tank of a law firm on Monday morning and face the whispers, the questions, the thinly veiled amusement of her colleagues. They didn't just know about her sister, they knew her sister was, in the civic and financial landscape of the city, a far more significant player than she was. Her ambition to make partners suddenly seemed small, her gala networking petty. She tried to spin it, of course. I heard through my Aunt Carol that Clara was telling everyone, "Oh, Zoe is just so humble, you know how it is. She kept this incredible project a secret from all of us. We're just bursting with pride." But the lie was transparent. Her failure to show up at my graduation, a fact I'm sure she conveniently omitted, made her claims of a close, supportive sisterhood ring hollow. Her power over me had been rooted in her ability to define my worth. Now, my worth was being defined on the front page of the newspaper by billionaires and mayors, and her opinion was suddenly glaringly irrelevant. My parents, the chief enablers, reacted in a completely different but equally revealing way. They tried to smother me with retroactive interest. My mother called again, her voice overflowing with a syrupy, desperate enthusiasm. "Zoe, honey, we are just so proud. We had no idea. You have to tell us everything. When can we see the project sites? Your father and I would love a tour. We should have a big family dinner to celebrate you." They were fawning, apologetic, and desperate to be included in my new, shiny world. They wanted to bask in this reflected glory, the same way they had always basked in Clara's. But their sudden fascination wasn't with me, the person I'd always been. It was with Dr. Zoe Vance, the impressive title they had read in the paper. They wanted to celebrate the success, but they had shown no interest in the struggle that produced it. The dynamic had been irrevocably broken, and a new one had to be built from the ground up, on my terms. In the weeks that followed, I began the slow, deliberate process of establishing new boundaries. The balance of power had shifted, and I was no longer the one seeking approval. My mother called relentlessly, trying to schedule the celebration dinner. I was polite but firm. "I'm very busy right now, Mum. The project is entering a new phase." My excuses were real. I was incredibly busy, but they also served a secondary purpose. I was teaching them that my time was valuable, a concept they had never before grasped. When I finally did agree to see them, I chose the location, a quiet cafe near my office, a neutral ground. Clara came, as did my parents. They looked uncomfortable, out of their element. It was the first time we had all been together since the reveal. My mother started immediately, gushing about the newspaper article. My father kept shaking his head, muttering, $100 million. I just can't get over it. Clara was unusually quiet, her eyes downcast, stirring her coffee with a tense, rigid motion. I let them talk for a few minutes, and then I held up a hand. I appreciate all of this, I said, my voice calm and even. But we need to be honest. My success didn't begin the day that article was published. My worth didn't magically appear when Mr. Harrison's name was attached to mine. I looked directly at each of them. My worth was there when I was 12, sketching the post office. It was there when I chose my major. It was there every single day of my PhD program. It was there on my graduation day. The only thing that changed is that you can see it now, because other, more important people validated it for you. The silence that followed was heavy with the weight of unspoken truths. My mother's eyes filled with tears. "We're so sorry, Zoe," she whispered. "We just didn't understand." I looked at Clara. She wouldn't meet my gaze. "I don't need apologies for your lack of understanding," I said, my voice softening slightly. "What I need is for you to understand that our relationship from this point forward has to be different. It has to be based on mutual respect for who we are, not what we achieve in terms you can measure. I love you all, but I will no longer be the family's footnote." It wasn't about revenge or rubbing their noses in my success. It was about liberation. The vindication wasn't the money or the title. It was the quiet, unshakable knowledge that I had been right about myself all along. It was the freedom to finally, fully inhabit the life I had built for myself, without the need for their permission or approval. And as I walked away from that cafe, leaving them to sit with the new reality I had created, I felt a lightness I hadn't felt in my entire life. I was finally free. My story is a testament to the quiet power of self-belief. For years, I allowed the narrative my family wrote for me to hurt me, but I never allowed it to define me. That frustration, that sting of being constantly underestimated, became the fuel for my secret ambition. It gave me the space and the privacy to build something magnificent, on my own terms. The ultimate lesson isn't about getting some grand public revenge. It's about understanding that your value is inherent. It exists whether people choose to see it or not. So don't wait for applause from an audience that doesn't appreciate your art. Build your own stage, write your own script, and become the star of your own show. Eventually the world will take notice, and the people who doubted you will be lining up for tickets. If you believe in the power of writing your own success story, hit that subscribe button. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you in the next one.